Going on, Michigan fans? Clayton Sayfie here with Chris Balas and Austin Fox. We are from the Wolverine.com discussing the latest with Michigan football, Michigan basketball here on the Wolverine TV. Fellas, Merry Christmas, almost New Year here. And we'll start out with some Michigan football talk with kind of a standstill here. The only bit of news, obviously, being Don Brown being dismissed by Michigan in the last week and Jim Harbaugh taking some time, relaxing a little bit while still working out in California and maybe trying to figure out what he's going to do with the staff if he does remain and kind of operating as if he is remaining as Michigan's head coach with 1 year left on his contract. But Chris, I guess, quick update on the latest here.
Did you get a new microphone, by the way, for Christmas?
No.
Where'd you get that thing?
The company.
Oh, really? Wow, I didn't get one of those. I need to invest. All right. Let's talk about Don Brown for a second. First, let's talk about Jim Harbaugh. He's in California right now with his family, and he's been kind of silent about with the team. The team's coming back on January 19th, so those guys get some downtime, and it's on them. Kind of the way it was before to make sure they stay in shape during COVID in the summer. If you'll recall, they all went home. I think Quiddy Pay was doing chin-ups on a jungle gym, and other kids were finding different ways to work out, getting creative. Some would argue, I'm sure the detractors would argue, well, whatever they did wasn't enough, blah, 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 blah. They got pushed around and so on and so forth. But they did a good job. It's going to be up to them again, I think, especially with Ben Herbert being courted by what's his name, Brett Bielema there going at Illinois, the new head coach at Illinois. If they poach him, then they're going to be looking for a new strength coach. But right now, these guys know what they're doing. But with Don Brown, man, everybody knows I was a big Don Brown fan, especially the first several years. I thought you're not going to find anybody who does it much better than he did it. Granted, Ohio State figured him out. They figured a lot of things out. I think that they tipped their hands sometimes and maybe didn't disguise their defenses well enough or whatever. But he had a great run here. Class act. I really like the guy. I think he'll do well wherever he goes. If he's 65 years old, whatever his next stop is. But wish him well and wish him all the success. I think he's a great guy.
I'm in the exact same boat as far as Don Brown. I think a lot of people saw this coming, but man, when I look back at his tenure, the positives are the first thing that come to mind for me. He finished with the top 3 defense nationally every single year from 2016 to 2018, and you just don't see teams really do that nowadays in college football. People love to point out how elite offenses shredded his defenses more often than not, but it was really only Ohio State. When you look back at it, Penn State in 2017, you could throw into that mix as well, but that was about it. And that's just where the game is nowadays. Elite defenses don't shut down elite offenses. And again, that's just the state of college football nowadays. So I think what Don Brown did here as a whole was absolutely incredible. I know it fell apart this past year when his defense finished right around 100th nationally or whatever they are. But again, the positives far outweigh the negatives, and I would love to see him have success once again if he becomes a defensive coordinator at a school out east.
Yeah, Austin, we talked about it last week on a separate podcast about his agent, I guess, said that he's going to be the best defensive coordinator ever at whatever school he goes to next, and it's probably true. I will always remember Don Brown fondly, first of all, for just the dude that he is. Seemed like a great guy. Obviously, I never got to meet him, but from what you guys have talked about and what everybody's observed just from a media standpoint, a fan standpoint, I mean, you can't get much of a better guy, and you can't get much of a better coordinator either when it comes down to it. Obviously, I think that you need elite talent to run his defense and just continue to do it, if you're not going to adjust the way that, other teams kind of adjust and play. A very good tenure, and it just didn't work out in the end. And people are right now, I think, a little sour about him. But when you look back on it as a whole, I think it's going to be met with mostly positives. But just speaking about Michigan football in general here in the next couple of weeks, obviously things have to happen at some point, whether that's an announcement from Ward Manuel saying that Jim Harbaugh is going to stay on with 1 year remaining. You feel like something has to happen. As we go down the line here and we have less than a week until the end of the NFL regular season when jobs start to open up, who knows what could happen. Jay Glazer from Fox Sports yesterday said that he heard of one team inquiring to the 49ers about, what it was like to work with Jim Harbaugh. Not sure if they're going to have glowing remarks based on the relationship there, but He certainly won a lot of games. What do you guys think? Let's say an offer gets thrown at him. I guess what would the appeal is, fresh start, going back to a league where you had a lot of success, and especially if you feel like you're not getting the respect from your athletic director in the form of a contract extension. There's some appeal there. At the same time, he doesn't seem like the type of guy that's going to run from maybe the challenge until someone throws him out. The challenge of turning Michigan around.
The old Jim Harbaugh, right? That was the jackhammer, and that was my first thought when Glazer reported. He said, "Yeah, somebody's called the 49ers." I said, "Well, he's not going to that team because what are they going to say?" Wasn't Jed York the guy where he said this meeting is for the men only or something like that?
You're on. He said that.
What's that?
He allegedly said that.
Yeah, allegedly. Okay, this meeting is for the men only. That can't go over real well with your boss. Imagine going up if your boss walks in the door, no matter how good a job you're doing, and say, "Hey, get out of here. This meeting's for the men only." You don't do that. So, but who knows? What I would say is that the longer it goes and that no contract has been signed and we don't know exactly where that stands, somebody said, hey, he's going to wait till Bloody Monday and then figure out what's happening and find out what his best move is. Right now he is operating, though, as though he's going to be here. He is looking at coordinators. You can look at the Ford at thewolverine.com, some of the ITF extras we've had recently. It's not like he's just sitting there sunning himself in California right now. Yes, he's spending some family time, but he wants to get this thing fixed. And I think there's a level of embarrassment there. He said in the middle of the year, we don't need to be embarrassed after they got beat by Wisconsin. Yeah, I think part of him has to be, and the competitor in him, the way they were getting beat, losing to a crappy Michigan State team. Rocky Lombardi's going to Northern Illinois. You got beat by that guy. It's unbelievable to me. And so there are some things to fix. I think he's in the process of fixing those, or at least trying. Yep.
Michigan plays Northern Illinois next year, so can't wait.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Wow. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. But yeah, so that's where we are. And I think that he's working on it. And so there are things going on behind the scenes. It's not like he says, okay, I'm wiping my hands of this program for 3 weeks or anything, guys.
Yeah, he absolutely has to be embarrassed after the way this past season played out and how bad the team looked throughout the year. If NFL teams are potentially interested in him, which there have been conflicting reports on that in recent weeks. Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk said teams absolutely are a few weeks ago. And then Jay Glazer comes back, a week later and says that nobody is. So we'll see if they actually are or not. I could see NFL teams potentially wanting him because of what he did with San Francisco, and that still being ingrained maybe in some NFL GM's minds. What he did with San Fran was incredible. From 2011 to 2013, he took him to the NFC Championship every single year, and obviously to the Super Bowl in one of those years. So he was viewed as one of, if not the best coach in football at the time, and I think that probably still resonates with some NFL organizations. So if the Jets or the Chargers or whoever it may be, if those head coaching jobs open up, which it certainly looks like they will, I wouldn't be surprised one bit if those teams come after him, despite the way Michigan struggled this past year mightily under Harbaugh.
Chris, do you think that there's a possibility, and we know for a fact that Harbaugh, like you've mentioned a couple times, is working while he's, kind of over the, holiday break or whatever. Do you think there's a possibility him and Ward are kind of figuring out, or Jim saying, hey, let me get my new coordinators or, a couple new assistant coaches in, and then we can talk about what you want to do going forward with the contract? Do you think that maybe possibly some of the hires have to do with possibly what the extension would look like?
I don't think so, because how can you give those guys, if they don't have a guaranteed job, how are they going to, join forces with Jim Harbaugh, not knowing what the status is? Hey, guess what, guys? I'm going to go to my AD here, and I'm going to tell him you're coming, and that's going to get me my extension, and maybe I'll get a little more money. That's not going to happen. So we do know that there are definitely some guys that have been contacted, and that there are going to be different things to work out with these coordinators. But he's operating, like I said, he's operating as though they're going to be here, as though he's going to be here, and operating as though, I can't imagine that he would have left that meeting, that Friday meeting with Ward Manuel, or that Thursday meeting, and be pursuing these guys if he didn't think he was going to be here, or if he didn't think they were at least close on an extension. And I can't imagine that Ward Manuel is going to let him go into last year of his contract without an extension and be a lame duck. That would be unbelievably short-sighted. You cannot recruit that way. And maybe, although maybe Ward Manuel's thinking, hey, look how he recruited, with people thinking that he might not be back. Look at the 2021 class, if he wants to bet on himself, then so be it. He's still recruiting well, and that Michigan's recruiting itself. I can't imagine that's the case, but you can't discount it as a possibility.
Yeah, well, people thought the class was going to totally, all defect and everything. And someone kind of said that it's like he kind of almost thrives in the unconventional. I mean, he doesn't have an agent. I think he's the only Power 5 head coach to not have an agent. It's amazing. A couple of years ago, John Beeline and Jim Harbaugh, I think, were like the two only like top coaches in the profession to not have agents, and both of them work for Michigan. But, so it's unconventional. I wouldn't throw, and that's why I threw that theory out there. It's like, we don't know what the hell is going on. So, it's just craziness kind of right now, Austin.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm ready for this thing to get wrapped up. I think the entire Michigan fan base is in that exact same boat. It's actually pretty impressive that Harbaugh and Michigan did hold that 2021 recruiting class together as well as they did. They only lost 2 commits in that entire class, Quentin Somerville and Brandon Jennings. And a lot of people didn't view Somerville as much of a loss. We heard that departure was mutual. So when considering that Michigan landed Edwards and held on to Xavier Worthy and signed Jaden Hood, there's no question that Michigan came out ahead. But again, this contract situation does need to get wrapped up sooner rather than later. And regardless of what happens, Ward Manuel and Jim Harbaugh need to figure this thing out here, because you do need to focus on that 2022 recruiting class here incredibly soon, when considering we almost are in January now.
Mm-hmm. Should we move on to hoops?
Let's do it.
All right. The more fun topic, I guess, Michigan undefeated, one of 8 power conference teams to be undefeated, one of 2, I believe, right, Austin? Big Ten teams to be undefeated in conference play, or 3, Northwestern as well, along with Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So, obviously a good start. Michigan hasn't had a tough schedule, but Chris, you wrote it over the weekend after the Christmas Day win over Nebraska. Any Big Ten win is a good one. There's no buts about it. The schedule will heat up a little bit heading into February, but there's still a stretch here where Michigan can kind of continue to just win games, and put themselves in contention at the end with that last, I think, an 8-game stretch that's just incredibly difficult. But right now, some winnable games, including New Year's Eve at Maryland.
You hope so, and that's going to be the toughest game they've played. And let's be clear, without taking away anything that Michigan's accomplished, there would be a lot of teams with Michigan's schedule that would be undefeated at this point, right? And then going to Oakland, overtime with Oakland, they clearly just overlooked that game, didn't bother to show up, kind of like Michigan's football team in half the games this year. But at the same time, everything that Juwan Howard has done in 2 years, okay, I was skeptical, and I think everybody knows that about the hire. You're thinking, okay, you're looking at Chris Mullen at St. John, you're looking at Patrick Ewing at Georgetown, and you're thinking, without head coaching experience, what are we going to get here? Is he going to treat it like an NBA thing where, okay, there are some days you take off and then, you don't have to work as hard? Juwan Howard has learned quickly, on the recruiting trail. He was sending out offers to how many kids? Everybody in the top 20, it seemed like. Now he's being more selective, and he's spending personal time recruiting these kids. That's number one. Number two, hiring Phil Martelli, which he said, I can't fail here. This is my alma mater. I can't fail. And having that sense of urgency to know what you don't know, and to hire a guy like Phil Martelli as your right-hand man. Martelli told us a couple of times, hey, he's going to be raising a banner or playing for a banner on a Monday night. I want to be part of that. He wasn't blowing smoke, man. And number three, this guy can coach, especially offense. You look at what they're doing on the offensive end and their sets. I've talked to a number of different coaches, and they've been extremely impressed with what they see on the floor with that offense. And he's just a likable guy, and that's always been the case, even when he was with the Fab Five. But you see him high-fiving guys on the bench after somebody makes a three, and you can tell how much these guys like them. A recent poll that of other players in the Big Ten, who would you like to play for if you weren't at your school? Juwan Howard was right up there, I think, tied with Tom Izzo, if I'm not mistaken. And that says something, man. This guy is something else. I like this guy. I like what he's done. There's a long way to go, guys, but I think there are a lot of positive signs beyond just raking in the 4- and 5-star recruits that this guy could be really good here.
I couldn't agree more. I like this Michigan team a lot so far this year. A lot of people have really brushed aside their 7-0 record and said it's a result of a weak schedule, but I think it's a little tougher than some people realize. I think that UCF win is being overlooked. UCF is really proving themselves in recent weeks. They won at Florida State 2 Saturdays ago, and Florida State was a top 15 team in the country. And then UCF nearly knocked off a top 6 Houston team this past Saturday before losing late. So I think you got to give Michigan a lot of credit for that one. I know Nebraska isn't good when Michigan played there on Christmas, but nevertheless, Michigan stayed focused after that long layoff, and they came out with a double-digit victory. Maryland, in my opinion, is the second worst team in the Big Ten behind Nebraska. So we'll see what Michigan does on New Year's Eve in College Park, but I still don't think that's going to be an easy game. I like the way that Michigan has come out and really been focused in every game with the exception of that Oakland game. They have not played down to their competition, and they've really every game they played, they've won by double digits with the exception of Penn State 2 Sundays ago. So I like where this team is headed. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I wouldn't be surprised if this team contends for a Big Ten title and finishes within the top 3 or 4 in the conference at season's end.
You know, you're not alone, man. I was trading texts with John Beeline, and he said this team passes the ball as well as some of our better teams. The way they share the ball, so they've got a bunch of seniors and upperclassmen that just want to win, and that's the formula, man. And give them credit, man, for continuing that culture. Juwan Howard has a Michigan team that, from a culture standpoint, looks like the best John Beeline teams. You don't have guys that are sulking and crying and whining, bitching about playing time. When Brandon Johns plays 5 to 10 games, he's on the bench, going crazy for his teammates. That is called culture. It's a lot better than football right now, I'll tell you that. And that is how you win, guys. And that and talent, obviously. But you got to love what you've seen.
I forget what I was reading, I think over the weekend, the difference between atmosphere and culture. It's like the atmosphere around the Michigan football team heading into this past season was good, but once you get punched in the mouth, right, the Mike Tyson thing, then you're leaning on your culture, and it seemed to be broken there. The basketball team, I mean, no matter what, even you have the Isaiah Livers, Juwan Howard dust up, right? I guess you could call it. They're yelling at each other in a timeout. But it wasn't anything underlying, and they continue to move forward, and you can just tell, like, we're not idiots. We can tell that just was one bump in the road and one thing that they learned from. So you're absolutely right. The culture. I love to hear that John Beeline feels that, that offense. I think the most amazing thing to me so far, especially with the offense, is how much it's clicking with how many newcomers they have. 6 new guys on the team, 4 that are really playing quite a bit, especially 3. And you look at Mike Smith and Sean D. Brown, the 2 transfers that are each playing their role. Mike Smith starts the game. He's rough on the defensive end. I think we all kind of knew that. But Sean D. Brown comes in that first half against Nebraska, plays good defense, solid defense against Teddy Allen, who was hitting every shot. And then in the second half, it's Mike Smith making the plays on offense. He had a stretch where he had 5 straight points and then assisted on the next 2 right after that when it was, a 4-point game. So they're playing their roles. It's clicking earlier than I thought it would. At the same time, like we said, things are going to kind of ramp up schedule-wise in about a month or so. But here's the schedule coming up. At Maryland on New Year's Eve, like we talked about, versus Northwestern, which looks tougher than we thought. Same with against Minnesota. At Penn State, against Wisconsin, obviously a top 10 game right now, so that'll be tough. At Minnesota versus Maryland, at Purdue, and then against Indiana. It's kind of the next 6-7 games. When is this team going to lose first? I think it'll probably be Wisconsin, but that's at home. And, Wisconsin's shown that they're a little bit vulnerable. So, I think that's kind of close to a toss-up. I don't know when they're going to lose first. At the same time, it's the Big Ten. It's a gauntlet. And every team, even like you said, Austin, the 13th team in the Big Ten is still actually a pretty decent team.
They'll be favored by
club, yeah.
They'll be 3 or 4 point favorites at Maryland and could easily lose that game, guys. It takes a bad shooting night or something like that. The good news is that there's always been somebody to lift the team up. If somebody's not playing well, somebody else comes in and gives them a boost. And that's what I love. Maybe they're not quite as deep as we thought they were, which stinks because I wrote in the magazine how that was one of the 5 things in the non-conference that we really learned about this team was that they're pretty deep. Brandon Johns needs to pick it up flat out, man. Terrence Williams is a freshman. He's going to have his pluses and minuses, but right now it's 6 or 7 guys that you can count on, and with Austin Davis out of the lineup, you can't go big once Hunter Dickinson's not out there. Hopefully he doesn't wear down. That's been one of the pleasant surprises for me, is how well he moves at his size. John Sanderson's done a hell of a job as the conditioning guy there for so many years, but man, Dickinson has been unbelievable in that respect. But you can't ask him to play 30 to 32 minutes a game, and they won't. So somebody's got to step up a little bit. But I do think that Maryland game is going to be tricky. They might be the 13th best team in the Big Ten, but they're still pretty good. I think they were still in the top 53, weren't they, before they lost? I think 13 of the Big Ten teams were in the Ken Pom top 53, and Nebraska was the only one that wasn't. So I would guess, guys, that it's 50-50 that they win the next two, going into that Wisconsin game. Those are two good teams they're playing, and the way Northwestern's playing and not having that home court advantage, quote unquote home court advantage, because there are no fans there. It's going to be very interesting, but every game is going to be interesting in the Big Ten. Even, it doesn't matter who you're playing, and that's what makes it fun to watch every single game this year, guys. That's why I love the Big Ten.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That Maryland game on Thursday night is not going to be easy. There's no question about it. I know there's not going to be an atmosphere out there in College Park, but that's still always been a tough place to play. I wouldn't be surprised one bit if Michigan drops that game and if that's their first loss of the year. But I agree with you, Clayton. I do think Michigan will be favored in every game going into that Wisconsin game, I believe, in mid-January. But with that being said, I do think they'll have probably 1 or 2 losses by that point, because every single game in the Big Ten is a grind. I know it doesn't mean a whole lot, but 9 of the 14 Big Ten teams are rated today in the Associated Press top 25. I wouldn't be surprised if that's an all-time record. That's 64% of the conference ranked, which is unheard of nowadays. Chris, you talked about Hunter Dickinson as well. What's impressed me about him is his consistency. He scored at least 11 points in every single game this year, and not only is he the best freshman in the Big Ten, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of the 2 or 3 best freshmen in the entire country. I haven't looked at a lot of other power conference freshmen numbers around the country, but the only one who's better that comes to mind is Oklahoma State's Cade Cunningham. Clayton, you and I talked about him on the podcast last week, but Dickinson is averaging, I think it's now 15 points and 8 boards on the year, which you just don't really see freshmen do that nowadays. So he's been absolutely incredible. They're going to need him to continue playing at a high level moving forward. But again, I like this team a lot, and I think they're going to have a pretty darn good record here over the next few weeks and manage through a very manageable January before the grind really sets in and the calendar flips to February.
Mm-hmm. Look forward each and every day. Like they play a game, and it's like, man, I can't wait for the next game. So it'll be exciting New Year's Eve at Maryland, and we'll see what happens. But great stuff, both you guys. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Check us out at thewolverine.com. And as we mentioned, kind of when we were talking about football, some big updates on some assistant coaching rumblings there. So check that out at thewolverine.com. Promo code BLUE60 for 2 months of the premium content for free. We'll see you next time.